Joyce.
I'm here.
Hello,
I
Joyce.
wanted to be there, but couldn't make it.
It's too windy.
I
I'm
know.
sorry.
I've been out in the wind all day, and that was enough.
We're under a wind advisory.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
We've got some nice heaters, but the wind is definitely annoying.
Yeah, can't
Yeah.
handle it.
Well, we have a couple of things to go through tonight, and then I did confirm that our guest will actually be joining us tonight.
Oh, good.
Max originally was supposed to be our guest in October, and we had the meeting at Mia's and Pia's, and the Wi-Fi was so bad that we had just no ability to do much of anything. And so he was supposed to be our guest last month to make up for October, and there was a massive power failure in Los Angeles, and this whole neighborhood was knocked out. So now we're finally, barring any last-minute problem, going to finally get Max in here. So I've known Max since college. He went to the University of Oregon. He's now a big-time film producer. He's done multiple films, worked on about 20 movies so far. His most popular films are the Netflix trilogy of the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series, which are the most popular films in the history of Netflix. And he was the producer of all three of those. So with that, first let me cut into a little promo video. This little promo I put together about some of the things that we're doing from the Klamath Film side. So today's meeting is important because our bylaws state that every year we elect 2 members to our board based on membership vote. Actually, before we get to that, I guess we should do introductions first. Even though I think just about everyone here knows each other so far. Hopefully we'll get some other people joining here shortly. But I'm Kurt Lidke. I'm the executive director of Klamath Film. I'm also a filmmaker and a commercial drone pilot. And I'm a journalist for the Herald and News. Amber, you want to?
Oh, hi, I'm Amber, and I am a board member. I'm a faculty at OIT in the communication department.
I'm Curtis Peoples. I'm chairing Klamath Film Board. This will be my last year for that, and I rotate off as chair. I'm also a faculty member at OIT, a faculty member at Texas Tech University, music archivist there, and just do countless other things.
This heater feels super nice. I'm basically burning my scalp right now, but I don't care. Feels good. Joyce, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Joyce Dickens. I'm an independent fine art photographer here in Klamath Falls, as well as a digital artist and acrylic painter. Happy to be here and am a member.
Thank you, Joyce. I see Olivia is joining us, as well as Heidi. Hello. Why don't you two introduce yourselves?
She made me turn the camera on. I'm Heidi. I'm Kurt's girlfriend, my daughter Olivia. We do whatever Kurt says as far as Klamath Film goes.
And Olivia, you need to introduce yourself.
I'm Olivia. I do whatever Kurt says to do us for Klamath Film.
Oh, sweet.
Thank you for joining us. Good to see my living room is still intact. Tom, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Tom Cooley. I've been doing films since the 1960s. Worked with major studios, MGM, 20th Century Fox. Worked with the Osmonds when the Donnie Marie show was on, and a bunch of other independent film folks like that. I like to make short films. Wouldn't mind doing a couple of long ones too. I do have one film that I have submitted for the film festival in September, and I'm looking forward to that festival itself. If I make it in or not, it's still going to be fun. Court, excuse me.
Hi, I'm Court.
Yeah,
I'm on the board too, and I too do whatever Kurt says.
And speaking of people doing things of whatever I say, I see our former intern Michael has joined us. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself?
You stole my joke, Kurt. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Mike. Yes, I interned for Klamath Film last year. I'm a senior at Oregon Tech in the professional writing program. And I'm also, of course, a member of Klamath Film because I just love watching films. Definitely interested in photography and sort of like the composition aspect of film as well. So I love getting all this like background info about that sort of stuff.
Cool. And Lori, hello Lori, introduce yourself please.
Yeah, I also take pictures if Kurt asked me to. Sorry, I had to add that. Yeah, I'm Lori. I'm a volunteer with Klamath Film. I was on the Klamath Film board a few years ago. Been a member for a few years. I do a lot of volunteering and backstage work at the Ross Raglan when there's events, do spotlight. And I submitted a short film into KIF last year, and it was selected, The Puzzle. And that was the first short film I had made and submitted to KIF. But for the most part, I just really enjoy art and creative endeavors and supporting that community.
Cool. Thank you, Lori. So we do have some upcoming events. The big one is that we have started doing what we are calling Friday Night Flicks. And that is taking one of our favorite short films from last year's film festival and re-showing it on the last Friday of each month at 7 o'clock and welcoming in the filmmaker for a quick Q&A. Joyce was part of that about a week ago when we showed Karaoke People. And I haven't decided which film we're going to do this month, but that will be March 20. Let me check my calendar real quick. I think the 26th. That is the last Friday of the month. So we'll be doing that here at the Falls Tap House. Hopefully it won't be as windy as it is tonight. But please join us here. There's a barbecue food truck. There's good beer on tap. Or we'll also do it on GoToMeetings. People can also join us online as well. And we're going to do that every single month leading up to the 2021 Film Festival of showing one of our shorts from last year and talking to the filmmaker and kind of reliving some of our favorite films from last year's Film Fest. So that's free and that's open to the public. I'll have the announcement up for it soon on klamathfilm.org and across our social media. I don't know, for those who attended, if you have a recommendation for a short last year that you particularly liked, by all means, speak up. I know we have one of the filmmakers actually on here right now, Lori. So I don't know, maybe we'll do The Puzzle in March. So we do have a little bit of business that we need to take care of today, and that is that our bylaws state that every year we hold a membership vote to determine 2 board members who serve 1-year terms on our board. Essentially, these members serve as the voice of all of our active paying members. I mean, I hope that anyone who is a paying member can come talk to me at any point if they have a question or a concern, but also these individuals represent the membership on the board. So normally we do that with an in-person ballot, but it being a global pandemic, instead this year we did a doodle poll online, and I sent that out to everyone who was an active member. Oh, looks like we have one more person joining here. Oh, Mary Jane's joining. Okay. Hello, Mary Jane. Hi there. We were just wrapping up introductions, Mary Jane. If you want to jump on and unmute and introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm Mary Jane, and I've been part of Klamath Film Group for about a year now, a little bit over, and I've learned a lot just by listening in mainly, and I don't know what else to add. We've lived in Klamath for 10 years or so, and well, it's nice to be here. I enjoy film and like learning about it. I've written a little bit. I've got a short or two that someday I hope to be able to make a film out of. And I'm not sure what else to add. Just like to write and learn. And I'm glad to be here.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, Mary Jane. I always appreciate you and Lori are our two most loyal meeting members. You're here every single month. So
Yeah, thank you. I enjoy it.
I was wondering where you were because we can't have a Klamath Film meeting without Mary Jane.
Yes, I was having trouble. I was in the February link and I didn't realize it. And I was thinking, oh, I'm not going to be able to figure this out. But then I got on the right link for March. So I'm here just a little bit late.
No worries, it's all good. So what I was saying was that our bylaws with Klamath Film require that we hold a membership vote every year to appoint 2 members as members of the board of directors for 1-year terms. We were supposed to do that in October, but instead we did that last month. So tonight we're announcing the result of those votes for the 2 members that will be serving not quite a 1-year term. They'll be serving through October, and then in October 2021 we'll do a new vote. So but before I get to that, I guess I should mention this. Has anyone noticed this downtown?
Yes.
We have a historic marker that we just put up outside of the Daily Bagel on Saturday. We held a special event where we did a screening of the movie Phoenix, Oregon, and we got approved for being on the Oregon Film Trail, which is this program that promotes the most historically significant films that have been shot in the state. And Phoenix, Oregon, obviously being only shot in 2018, a very new film, but in 2020 it became the #1 movie in America for 1 week through a total fluke of circumstances. And so we got approved by the Oregon Film Office, and this past weekend we did a live stream and an in-person audience to formally unveil that marker. Then we showed the movie at the Ross Ragland. And then we got to do a super fun Q&A with some of the cast members from the film. So we talked to some of the actors that were involved in the movie. I posted that video on the Klamath Film Facebook page yesterday. So if you want to check out our Q&A with Jesse Borrego, Luis Rodriguez, Gary Lundgren, and Reynaldo Gallegos, it was a ton of fun. We talked for about an hour about some of the projects they've done in Phoenix, Oregon, and why they loved filming in Klamath Falls. It was a ton of fun. And Reynaldo and Jesse, especially, those are 2 actors that you may not know the names per se, but when you see the face, you immediately know because they've been in 1,000 different movies and TV shows. Absolute legends in among the acting community, and they had nothing but great things to say about their experience in Klamath Falls. In fact, I've been talking to Jesse, and Jesse Borrego will likely be our guest next month for our Klamath Film meeting. So if you missed out on the Q&A, he's going to come back and join us, and we'll be able to chat then about all the different projects he's worked on, and he's worked on a 1,000 different projects. So I see we have someone else joining us just now, John. Hello, John. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like you're trying to say something, but I'm not hearing anything come out. We were just wrapping up introductions. I was going through a little bit of business before we get to our guests tonight. So John, if you want to introduce yourself to the group, that would be fantastic.
I'll try this mic. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right.
I can't.
All right. Let me try my.
Okay, I guess everyone else can hear you, John, but we can't hear you.
Okay. Anyway, hello. I'll try the other mic. Sorry, it's a problem, guys. Anyways, for those that you can hear me, I'm from Klamath here. Been here a long time. Have gone off to work and just am currently back here. So can you guys
we're
hear
hearing
me?
you now, John.
Okay. Yeah. And I've always been kind of interested in film. I knew Tom Cooley growing up, and I've met some of the other guys at some of the other, when you get together at some of the other places, and I've gone to a couple of the film festivals. As much as I'd like to get into the film side of it, I guess I'm more on the music side of it right now. I guess I'd be more interested in maybe collaborating to maybe try to provide some music at some point. I don't know if I would be the point man. Maybe somebody to just try to add something, but and then see if what I can produce is worthy at some point. So that's where I'm kind of at right now.
Sorry, we had momentary technical difficulties with our speaker. Okay, check. Is everyone still hearing us okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. You're hearing us.
Yes.
Oh, hey, Nick. Just in time, man.
I looked down, I saw it screen. I'm in the right place.
Yep. Well, we were just going around wrapping up introductions. I was talking about the vote. So if you wanna introduce yourself while I get our audio issue fixed.
Okay. And I'm speaking into
that mic right there.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Alexander, and I'm a filmmaker here in Klamath Falls. Last year, my first documentary film screened at the Klamath Film Festival. Super successful, and yeah, happy to be here tonight. Finally having in person. Yeah. Hello to everyone online.
Okay, cool. Well, Nick, your timing is perfect because we were just talking about the Peace Oregon event.
Oh, right.
And the next thing is the result of our membership vote. So we had a members vote online for doodle poll to determine 2 new board members based on active members being allowed to vote. The results of that vote, each people appointed are going to serve through October on our board of directors. So the result of that vote is you.
Wow, that was timely.
Yeah. So Nick and Wayne received the most votes in a very, very close vote. So Nick and Wayne are going to serve on our board of directors.
through October. So I will get you all of the details. Our meetings are third Tuesdays of the month on GoToMeeting. Yeah, no, that's the way GoToMeeting does it. They see it normal, but it looks flipped on our screen. Okay, so, well, thank you. Yeah. Happy to serve. There's also a couple committees that, if you want, we'd love to have you be a part of. We've got a fundraising committee, a budget committee, an events committee, and what's the fourth one? Curtis, I'm blanking. Marketing, yeah. And so we meet usually once a month via GoToMeeting to discuss upcoming things. I know this is a sweet spot for the seat right now, but we're violating the whole 6 feet rule because it's the warm spot.
Hey, Kurt, if possible, can you kind of raise the camera up a little bit? Because we're kind of getting cut off at the head level.
I'm hoping that we get audio. I'm seeing that report. Not getting much of any audio out of my speaker for some reason. So our guest tonight should be joining us any second. Max Siemers is a producer in Hollywood, the University of Oregon grad. I've known him since he was in college. He really worked his way up. He started, running a lot of errands around LA and as an intern, and now he's producing major feature films. So I'm glad we could finally get him to join. Before that, though, our submission window is now open for the Klamath Independent Film Festival. So if anyone has films, I know Tom, you've already submitted one of your films, so thank you for that. You can submit films through June 1st for Klamath Independent Film Fest. And while we're waiting for Max to join, I also want to get this opportunity to network if there's any upcoming projects or things people are working on. We continue to talk to multiple feature film productions that are in the pre-production phases of hopefully coming to Klamath Falls, but it's a matter of budget, of figuring out all of the state incentives, and of course, everything that's complicated by COVID as far as on-set testing and travel restrictions from California. So we're working on that. There we go. Okay. Notice we're all huddled here because of the heater right there. Yeah. It's good to meet in person again, but we didn't pick the best of nights. Nick, have you been working on any projects?
As of late, yeah, variety of different, mostly like commercial, short form, high quality commercials for different clients. Just recently got hired to film a couple commercials for an ISP over in Lakeview. They serve rural communities, so made a drive out to Lakeview, first time in a long time for me.
I lived out there for a couple years.
Did you?
So,
Yeah. So it was fun when you don't know the roads too well. It's 2 hours of driving east, and yeah.
An external speaker, but if nothing else, we could just run off of the speaker here. Could we actually do it off the TV? Check. Somebody say something.
Hello. Can you still hear us?
There we go.
Can you still hear us?
Yeah.
Can you still hear us?
Nice.
Can you still hear us?
Yep. Okay, David's trying to join the meeting too, but he's having issues. Oh yeah, no, that's the Wi-Fi here. So we're still connected, but our Wi-Fi connection is a little slow here. But as long as we can hear people,
We'll plug out at the back of the.
Oh, okay.
I found the audio to it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that works too.
We have to pull it back.
Yep. All right, bear with us while we still work through our audio issues here. Has anyone else been working on any film projects? Lori, have you been working on a project, or Tom?
Well, I'm working.
I know you've been thinking about it.
Well, I'm working on. Go ahead.
Hold on.
I'm up for audition in. What is it? Can we get that in there? Can we get that in there?
Yep.
Golden Age.
We've got auditions. I'm slated to We've got a time delay in there.
Sorry, folks. Here, Curse, let's see if we can get the second mic unwrapped.
What do you want?
They're saying if we can get the mic a little bit closer to us. Yeah, I mean, I could stay there, but they get that second mic a little bit closer.
Hey, Kirk, we're getting an echo.
Yeah. That may be necessary tonight. Sorry. Can you switch to placebo?
Echo.
Yeah, you got a delay on one of those mics.
Yeah.
Placebo to try the Stormbox. Check.
That sounds better. What about you, Kurt? Do you have a problem? Or, excuse me.
Okay. I'll put audio monitor off. Okay. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Loss of echo? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with us on that. Sorry. Let me check in with Max right here. I don't know, any other projects people are working on that they want to talk about, or ideas for projects, upcoming things? Of course, keep in mind our Friday Night Flicks event is going to be end of March here at the Falls Tap House. We have it, but I thought that the wind was going to knock it over, so that's why we did the TV. Yeah, I mean, next time if it isn't this wind, set it up in the grass right there with a projector.
Keep coming.
Okay. I just sent Max a message. He should be joining any second now. Did anybody get a chance to check out our Phoenix, Oregon event? And what did you think?
I was there. I loved it. That was me.
Did you stick around for the Q&A afterwards too?
I stayed, but I didn't participate. But it was very interesting to see the actors and hear what they had to say. It was an amazing movie. Is there any chance that that movie's going to be available to share with our families at all? I've got someone I would really love to see it. And if not, where can we buy it or see it?
So it is available on Amazon and a few other platforms on DVD and Blu-ray, and also available online to stream. If you go to phoenixoregonmovie.com.
Okay.
phoenixoregonmovie.com. I think it's $5 to stream the film, and then you can also buy a hard copy too.
Yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed every bit of it. The actors were so convincing. I walked away from the movie wanting one of Carlos's pizzas. You know, it was like, wow. Yeah, it was great.
And it's fun to know, like, oh, that's Pine Street. That's Main Street. That's 6th Street. That's the Daily Bagel. I've sat there.
It was cool seeing some of the places and recognizing them in the movie.
I had tons of fun talking with Jesse Borrego and Reynaldo Gallegos and Gary and Luis. Jesse and Ray especially are absolute icons. They've been in tons and tons of movies. They were in American Sniper, Rambo, Bad Boys 2. For Ray, he's been in Charmed, CSI, ER, 24, tons of different TV shows. And then Jesse's been acting since the early 80s. He got his start on the TV show Fame in 1984. He's been pretty consistently appearing in TV shows and movies ever since. Also a very accomplished dancer and musician as well. And so I'm going to try to get Jesse to be our featured guest next month. So we can talk to him about working in the film industry for almost 40 years. And then Max should be joining here any second now. Sorry, bear with us. He said 6:30-ish that he'd be available. I don't know, maybe he's stuck in LA traffic. Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. What's the you said an ISP?
Yeah, internet service provider.
Okay. Yeah.
It's TNET.
Yeah, TNET.
Broadband.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. I think I'll be able to be a little creative with some shots and filming out the open skies. I'm on the ranch. It should be a fun project, maybe a little different than the typical, about video where you're stuck inside and just four walls. Whereas they got cattle, they got high desert vibes going. So yeah, that's one project. But just during the pandemic, just an uptick. But everyone, is wanting video content. So we have a couple virtual events where they want us to do a pre-recorded style.
Right after I lived in Lakeview for a couple of years, totally on accident. I took a job with the newspaper, the Lake County Examiner. I thought I was applying for a job in Lake Oswego. And then I got the job really easily in a phone call and thought that was too easy. Looked up, saw that it was Lakeview, and went, oh crap. But I moved to Lakeview. What's cool about that was there had been zero film production done in Lake County. I found one OPB special and a couple things people shot on their phone. And so coming up from LA, I thought it was a clean slate as a filmmaker. And so I went there and worked for the newspaper for about 2.5 years. And in that time, I produced over 1,000 videos for the Lake County Examiner. Filming tons of community events and doing advertising for local businesses and weekly news mini broadcasts. So that was super fun and trained me for coming over to Klamath. So that was good. So tiny community, yes. For those who don't know, we're talking about a town of 2,000. That's about 100 miles east of here. They have more cows than they have people. But there's tons of really interesting community events that always happen out there. And that was home for a couple of years. Yeah. Let me double check with Max and see what the holdup is.
I know, right?
Appreciate you bearing with us. Thank you. Max. Okay. Waiting on Max. Sorry. So while we're waiting on him, I do have a little demo reel of some of the work that Max has worked on. So.
He left us a mission, what he wants us to do together.
I could have just opened the front door.
Ford and I have been best friends for years. We do everything together, which probably explains why we're both terrible at dating.
I should go.
What?
Oh my God.
You're not gonna leave a tip?
It's another trick of his, he ain't no whiz, so don't feed his fire. Jump in my balloon, I'll take you higher, take you somewhere over.
Maybe for you there's a tomorrow. What happened last night? What are you talking about?
You look like you're having a great night.
I just got dumped.
Let's get out of here. Come on.
I think you should branch out. Make some new friends.
Nope.
You never know what could happen.
That's what I'm afraid of.
My letters are my most secret possessions.
Can I talk to you?
Technically, she wrote 5.
Anyway, he started fake dating to make his ex-girlfriend jealous
She went nuts.
and cover up Lara Jean's real crush. Then everything got all weird and they started real dating on their totally real girlfriend and real boyfriend, and they are adorable.
Grab the big light, check the north side.
Put your hands in the air now.
Have you had any trouble relating to people?
No. Tell me something, just for me.
First time I saw you, Jed tried wrapping his arm around you. It was a good first impression.
Caitlin was cute, airy, hardly a reason to pop like a zit.
What happened? Caitlin exploded. What? Like a bomb?
No, like a balloon?
So that's Max. He is currently in production of several films right now that are going to be coming out later this year. His most popular series, as I said before, the To All the Girls I've Loved Before films. To All the Boys I've Loved Before are the most watched Netflix original films in history. And he said he's going to be joining us in 2 minutes. He's just wrapping up a Zoom meeting. So, the life of a film producer, there's always something going on. This is a good opportunity to talk to someone who works in Hollywood on major films. Very nice guy. So, just anything that you want to ask, by all means, speak up if you have a question for him. I'll give him a chance to kind of explain how he got into the industry and how he got to the position that he's at. But this is a guy that, when I was in LA, he was still kind of paying his dues, doing a lot of errands for people as a personal assistant and reading a lot of scripts and all the dirty work they have to do in Hollywood to kind of earn your place before you get to where he is now as a major film producer. So, sorry, my phone keeps going off and multitasking is hard. But appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Yeah, are you figuring out how to beat down wind so that you get more heat?
I'm trying to find the spot.
Get the sweet spot here. Oh. All of you who decided to stay home were smart, but thank you, Nick, for joining us. I'm going to zip up here.
I contemplated, but when there was an in-person option, I thought, oh, what the heck?
Well, there's barbecue. Barbecue and beer is tough to pass on. So. Okay, that should be Max joining right now. There's Max. Hello, sir.
Hi, everyone.
I think we may have lost audio for a second. Hey, Max, thank you for taking the time to join us for the third time, kind of. So, Max, I originally invited to be our guest for our October meeting, but the Wi-Fi was so horrible, I ended up talking over him the entire time. And last month, we tried to get him to come back, and he had a massive power failure, so couldn't do that. So thank you, Max, for coming back again. Appreciate it. Nice hat, by the way, too.
Thank you. Go Ducks.
We lost audio in-house, but I'm sure everyone on the call can still hear, so bear with us for a minute while we try to fix the audio here.
How's everyone in the house doing?
I don't know why it keeps dropping.
Yeah, they
Check,
keep
check.
losing from an external speaker. Can you hear us now, Kurt?
Can you hear us okay? Yes.
Test, test.
Okay, Max, can you talk to it so that we can do a sound check? Why don't you explain kind of how you got into the film industry? That'll give us a chance to test out our audio.
Sure. Yeah, I got into the film industry. I went to the University of Oregon without an exact idea of what I wanted to do with my life. I'd played baseball my whole life through high school, and I thought I was going to go to college to play baseball, but I tore my rotator cuff in my senior year. And so as a pitcher, that was kind of it for me. And I ended up in an internship after my freshman year at the CW. I had an uncle who was working there in the marketing side, and they were just launching a new show called Gossip Girl. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it was pretty popular back in the mid-2000s. And so I worked on the first season of Gossip Girl as an intern, and really got a sense for on-set production and really enjoyed it, and decided I wanted to keep giving that a shot. So I came back the next summer for another internship in Los Angeles, and I worked for a company called Spyglass Entertainment. They were one of the production companies on Star Trek. They made that movie Wanted with Angelina Jolie. And I got a sense of how they as a production company sort of operated, how they produced movies. And that's what really kind of, I guess, lit my fire, if you will. I got excited by the producing side. So the last summer before my senior year, I came back and I interned at Paramount and got a sense of how the studios operate internally. And then after I graduated, I ended up with a job at Lionsgate as an assistant. I kind of learned how different the business is when you're actually working there. It's a pretty foreign place from Eugene, Oregon, and even from where I'm from in Oakland, California. And took me a couple of years to kind of grasp the mentality. But ultimately, I started to bring in some material as an assistant that Lionsgate wanted to make, and sort of proved my value beyond just being an assistant. And I got promoted to being a studio executive. And then from right after that happened, Summit and Lionsgate ended up merging. And the person that I was working for at the time, Matt Kaplan, who ran our division, decided to leave and start his own production company. And so I left with him. We ended up going to partner with a company called Blumhouse. They make a lot of horror movies like Paranormal Activity and Get Out. And we were kind of with them in their early years, in their inception. We were there for about 2.5 years. And then we ended up at this company called Awesomeness.tv, where we started making young adult films. I think we saw a gap in the marketplace. The John Hughes movies of old weren't being made anymore. We felt like we could kind of fill that gap in a modern way, and we made this movie called To All the Boys I Loved Before for Netflix. Now the third iteration of that movie just came out about a month ago. And then we left that company and started building our own production company called Ace Entertainment. And we make about 5 movies a year now, both in the romance and rom-com space, but we also make horror movies, we make thrillers, we make contained sci-fi movies, as long as we feel like we can finance it under $10 million and it's a commercial film, we'll make it.
Very cool. Yeah, this guy's come a long way from when I knew him in college.
Yes. It feels like a long time ago.
So your most recent film released is the third in the To All the Boys I Loved Before series, and then right before that you had the movie Spontaneous. Can you talk about some of the upcoming projects that you're working on? I'm sure you're working on some stuff that hasn't been publicly announced yet, so don't worry about it. But if there's anything that maybe is in post that you can talk about you've been working on?
Yeah, so we just shot 2 movies recently. We shot a movie in Vancouver in October and November that is called Hello, Goodbye, and Everything in Between. The film is, I kind of liken it to a modern day American Graffiti. That's sort of how I responded to it. It all takes place in the last night of high school before all these kids leave for college. It's in the middle of the summer. And it's about a couple that's been together for 2 years and hasn't decided if they're going to stay together long distance or if they should amicably split up because it's just never going to work. So that's a movie we finished shooting in Vancouver. And then I just got back from London from being there for the past 3 months, where I was shooting a romantic comedy that is about a boy and a girl who fall in love on a plane flight from New York to London. The girl's going there for her father's second marriage for his wedding, and the guy is going there because his mother has terminal cancer. So they are both learning to open up and become vulnerable and fall in love in the midst of their own grief or their own sort of tragedy they're dealing with in their family lives. And then I'm leaving in about 3 weeks for Winnipeg, Canada to shoot a horror movie. The director of Happy Death Day and Freaky is producing with us. So the tone is similar, but it's sort of Back to the Future meets Scream. It's about a 17-year-old girl in 2020 who lives in a Rust Belt Midwest town that's kind of seen better days. We learned that her sister was murdered just before she was born. Her sister was 17 at the time. And there was a killer in town that killed 6 teenagers. And she ends up finding a time machine and going back to 2003, where the whole movie really takes place. And she has to stop this serial killer from killing her sister. So it's a movie about sisterhood, about 2 17-year-old sisters that I've never met. And it's also a really fun popcorn horror movie. And as a teenager who grew up in the early 2000s, I am going to have a lot of fun making fun of 2003.
Well, I apologize for background noise, Max. This is the first time we've been able to meet in person again in a while. So there's this great outdoor beer garden that's right over by the Oregon Tech campus. And yesterday was beautiful, and today we've got like 30 knot winds. So we're bearing through a freezing cold night here.
I'm jealous. I wish Los Angeles was a little bit safer to go outside at a beer garden. That would be nice.
Well, I've talked to this guy plenty, but I want to open it up to our members. If you have any questions for a Hollywood film producer, this is your chance to talk with Max about the filmmaking process and kind of behind the scenes, how films get made, fundraising process, crazy things that come up on set that producers have to deal with. Like I don't know what sort of stuff you've dealt with, Max, but we have a pretty famous producer who grew up here in Klamath named Bergen Swanson. I was talking to him yesterday. He went from repairing bicycles in Klamath to working with Tom Hanks. And he just wrapped up recently a film with Zack Snyder called Army of the Dead that's coming out soon. It's basically like all of the films matched with like Ocean's 11. And he was having some issues with the mob while trying to film in Las Vegas. I remember talking to James Ivory, Academy Award-winning filmmaker who is also famous, and he told me about a movie he made in India once where his lead actor got arrested, thrown in prison on day 1 of filming. And so they had to figure out how they were going to work around schedules while they negotiated his release from prison. So all those little kind of fun things that producers have to deal with. What are some of the zanier things that you've had to cope with as a film producer?
Look, I think I'm fortunate enough that I haven't had to deal with a ton of that as a producer. In my years as producing the majority of the films that we've made, we typically work with younger cast. We work with a lot of actors who are 18 to 25 years old, and although that, they can present some of their own challenges, oftentimes they're not at a place in their career where they're causing the kind of snafus that an A-list star might cause due to their own vanity or ego. There's a number of stories that I had heard about when I worked for Lionsgate, when I was at other studios. You hear these sort of stories that have happened, but I've been fortunate. I haven't really had to tackle anything like the mob in Vegas. I think something that I've dealt with on a number of different movies in the past is just especially with young actors, you're dealing with you're dealing with a lot of people who didn't really go through high school, didn't go through college, and a film set can sort of be high school for them. They're whether they're having a relationship with someone else on set or that's just friendships on set, but the sort of drama that you might deal with in high school or college can happen on a film set when you're working with younger actors. And so it's the sort of thing that we kind of have to deal with on a movie to movie basis, and realize that I'm in my 30s, and so some of the things that might seem important to other people might not seem important to me in the moment, but I try to put myself in their shoes. I'm trying to think if I've had anything absolutely crazy that I'm allowed to talk about. That's sort of the other challenge. I feel like when I'm older, potentially like some of these other producers who have been through the ringer, and some of these stories are maybe a little bit more dated, they're the kind of things you can kind of speak about. But I think a lot of the juicier things that I've sort of dealt with in the past few years are they're recent, and I still work with these people, so I can't really talk too much about them. I think if there was maybe a more specific question towards something, I can give a little more detail, but it's hard to think about anything that I'm really allowed to divulge in or should divulge in for my own sake.
Okay.
I totally get it. I'm still bound by a couple of NDAs when I was living in LA, and damn, man, I haven't lived in LA for like 7 years, so I totally get it.
Something that's like totally harmless, but it is a side of the business that a lot of people don't realize when they come in is, when you're an intern or you're an entry level assistant, it's a real grind. I mean, the hardest thing in this business is getting from, it's not getting in as an assistant. It's that jump from being an assistant to whatever it is you want, whether it's being an executive or a producer or actually being a working director or actor or writer. And the things that, bosses make their assistants do in this town is pretty crazy. And I don't necessarily mean in a scandalous sort of way. I actually think our industry's gotten a lot better since I was an assistant about 10 years ago dealing with this sort of stuff. But I remember one time we had a movie, we had the first cut of a movie that was a very high profile movie. And we had an A-list actor and an Academy Award winning actor and an Academy Award winning director. And we had to send the first cut of the film to this actor, but this was before the time when we had great streaming services. This was earlier, it was about a decade ago when we really would deliver actual cuts to people. So we sent an intern all the way to Australia to hand deliver the cut to an actor, wait for that actor to watch the movie, and 24 hours later fly back from Australia. I remember being an assistant being like, this is genuinely crazy, telling an intern. The intern was thrilled. He got a free trip to Australia for 48 hours. But yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, does anyone have a question for Max that they'd like to discuss? This guy's worked on a bunch of different movies, so plenty of experience and advice to divulge.
Yeah, I got one. This is Court. Did you? What was the process of working your way up into a production position? Was that through bringing in outside material, or just working on other productions?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this industry is that there's no one way to get to where you want to go. It's one of the things when I'm talking to interns who are looking to who are going to graduate soon, or prospective people coming in the industry from college. The thing I try to remind people is to every single point in your life through college, someone's giving you a curriculum or a syllabus. They're telling you exactly what to do to pass the class or graduate. It's all right in front of you. And the minute you graduate from college, it's not like that. There's industries that do have that, right? There's sales jobs, and there's other places where, you put in your time, you're a good employee, and you get promoted. But the film industry is very much a what have you done for me lately business. And, you get into this industry as an assistant, and your first job really is to just be a good assistant, learn the organizational stuff. And the thing that I didn't realize when I was younger and I started to understand the longer I was an assistant was being an assistant's actually a really great training to become a producer or executive. Because ultimately, being a producer, 50% of my job is just being a firefighter. I'm just putting out fires. Someone's bringing me a problem, and I just have to fix it. That's half the job as a producer, and that's basically the entire job as an assistant. It's just a lot of problem solving. So when you're an assistant, you're gaining a ton of problem solving skills, understanding how the business operates, understanding who's important, how to manage people, how to manage up, how to manage down, and then ultimately getting to that next phase, if you want to be a producer or an executive, is really about added value, because everything I was just describing is what you're being paid for. It's going that extra mile and creating a lot of relationships in your off hours with other people around town who are going to feed you information or material that will be really beneficial to the company you're working for, whether that means they're acquiring a project you brought in, or you had a friend who was a director who you helped bring onto a project, or you just provided some really crucial insider information that saved the company from doing something stupid. The more connected you make yourself in this industry, the more valuable you become. And that's really the point where you start getting looked at for that next step up. And for myself, I learned that early. I had a really good mentor who I actually still work with, Matt Kaplan. He runs our company. I've worked with him for 11 years now. And the great thing about Matt as a mentor in this industry, and it's a rare thing, honestly, is Matt always gave me enough rope to hang myself. He always let me kind of run. And if I made a mistake, it wasn't a big deal. We kind of have this motto in our company: you're allowed to mess up as many times as you want, just don't mess up on the same thing twice. Learn from every mistake you make so you can grow. And that sort of freedom in this industry is rare. A lot of bosses micromanage. And so I was fortunate to have a boss who encouraged me to run before I could walk. And in doing so, I messed up left and right, but I learned a lot. And I ended up bringing in a lot of material and making a lot of relationships that improved the value of a lot of our projects. And I got promoted. And at every step of the way that I got promoted, Matt and I would sit down and talk about, okay, great, you've gotten really good at this. This is really valuable. Here's where you need to improve. If you want to get to that next step of your career, if you want to be seen in a different light, this is the next thing for you to do. And so the great thing about this industry is that there's so many different levels of your career as a producer or an executive, and they all require different things. And a lot of the time, it's hard to acquire some of the skill sets that you need later in your career before you're there. One of the hardest skill sets to acquire is how to talk to the guys in charge, right? Or the girls in charge, how to talk to the studio heads, how to talk to the heads of agencies, how to talk to A-list directors and actors who have been doing this for so long and understand this business to a certain level. That just takes time and experience. That just takes years of experience. It's not something you can necessarily learn in a young age. And the ones who can are the ones who are running really successful companies at this time. Those people separate themselves in that manner. Matt, who I work for, is someone who grew up in this industry and literally grew up around studio heads as a kid. Some of his best friends, their dads were studio heads, and so he understood them from a young age. And so by 25, he was given his own division of the studio, which is unheard of. So it's one of these really rare qualities at a young age to understand, and I was fortunate enough to sort of learn from osmosis from him.
Well, we got a question in the chat room, but Lori, you're welcome to unmute if you just want to ask it directly.
Oh.
Sure. Hi, Max. So I had a few questions, I guess I sort of put together. You had mentioned that you film movies up to 10 million, and I was just wondering why up to 10 million and not over, as well as how is the experience between or been the same or different in filming in between different countries? Because you mentioned a few different locations. Yeah. And is there any location that you really enjoy or prefer to film at?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the financial question. There's a number of reasons why we don't shoot over 10 million. I would say the first and foremost is, we raise a certain amount of funding and we want to make a certain number of films with that funding. And so we have to sort of break it up in a certain way. We raised about $75 million in financing before COVID hit, with our intention to make about, 8 to 10 movies. Now, in theory, we could take a massive risk with that fund and go make a $75 million movie. But, if we swing and miss, there goes the fund. That being said, it's more of a creative decision, to be honest. Matt and I cut our teeth in the low budget space when we were working for Jason Blum. And even before that at Lionsgate, we learned how to make $5 million movies, which have low risk and high reward. So specifically, in the genre space, Jason Blum really cracked this amazing formula that studios really hadn't figured out around 2009 when he made Paranormal Activity. You can make horror movies for a certain price. They can look good. You don't need big stars as your leads. You can keep the locations to a minimum. And a lot of what you don't see is scarier than what you do. So forget the visual effects. When you can make movies like that for a cheap price, but that are still commercial and entertaining, and there's just a massive upside. So if you go look back at the first Paranormal movie, for example, that movie made, I think, $150 million. That movie was made for $100,000, if I recall. So it's when you look at the profit you can make from making a lower budget movie that's still commercial and you're not cutting corners, there's a lot of upside in that. And the reality is it's very hard to lose money at that price. So the way that a lot of these deals work, with home entertainment, with output deals at studios, they have a lot of systems built in where at a $5 million budget movie, it's hard to lose money. And if you're going to lose money, it's a very limited amount of money. The third reason for making movies at that price, if I'm honest, is also the amount of creative control you have. When you're making movies for a cheaper price, you have less people who are financing the movie pay attention. Now, luckily, this is our own money, so there's no one at any point that we have to answer to. But if we were making a $5 million or $10 million movie for a studio, they are not going to be as intrusive necessarily on the creative with us and the director and the writer as they would be on, say, a movie of $150 million, because that investment is just so much greater. And we've found the most success in our careers to be when we've been making movies at a lower price and we have less cooks in the kitchen. So, for example, To All the Boys I Loved Before was a movie that we financed and we sold after the fact to Netflix. So when we made that movie, it was our production team, it was the director, it was the writer, it was the actors, it was our author, and there was kind of no one else. And that level of intimacy can really build a great creative product. And the more people you have involved, the harder it can get, because everyone has different agendas, whether they're protecting themselves from certain things or they're worried about maximizing merchandising profits. There's a lot of different things that go into these bigger movies that make it a lot harder for them to be financially successful. So financially, that's why we tend to stick under 10 million. As far as locations, I guess, so the experiences are different in the way that I think cultures are different. The British have a very, I just shot in London and I loved working with them. Our crew had a very much like a keep calm and carry on mentality. If there was an issue, I didn't feel like there was panic on set. They very much were, all right, no problem. We got it taken care of. We'll come back to you in whatever amount of time with it fixed. There was no drama around any issues we had. In America, it can be different, but it depends on the state, honestly. We haven't had too many bad experiences with crews. But the truth is we shoot in different locations based on where creatively it makes the most sense for the movie. Financially, who has the best rebate in the moment. And then currently, where is it safe to shoot with COVID? when we first were prepping to go to London, it was actually really safe there. And by the time we got there, it wasn't. And then we just kind of had to roll with the punches. We were fortunate. We didn't have a single COVID case on our entire production. Our production was really conscious of everything. Everyone wore their masks, and go to the pubs after we were done shooting. Everyone was really respectful of the set. And London was a great place to shoot. It's just a beautiful place in general. Very different vibe from Los Angeles. But generally, I love working in Vancouver. We've shot a lot of movies in Vancouver. The crews there are total professionals. There's so many good crews there now. The resources there are great. It's a beautiful city. We have a lot of relationships up there. And so we've been able to have a lot of repeat business with casting directors we've worked with up there, and line producers we've worked with up there, and ADs we've worked with up there. So Vancouver is a place that we always just feel very comfortable going to, both in the sense that the crews are great, the accommodations are great. We don't feel like we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it's an easy flight home. During COVID, it's tricky because there's a 2-week quarantine there, so we can't be going back and forth. But before COVID, it was very easy to be able to, get up there for shooting. And if we had to come back for an emergency meeting in Los Angeles because we had to pitch at a studio or we had to meet somebody, 2.5 hour flight, you miss one day. It wasn't too bad. But we're about to shoot in Winnipeg for the first time. I've never shot there, but I've heard great things, so I'm excited. We're going to shoot there in May, so it shouldn't be too cold. I've shot in New York and Vancouver, Korea, London, South Carolina, Louisiana, LA, kind of shot all over the place. Wherever there's a rebate.
Right. And actually, that's something that I've been on some calls recently. We've got a measure going through the Oregon State Legislature right now to potentially boost the state incentives here. And so I've been part of lobbying groups along with our local tourism agencies and whatnot to talk to our state reps to try to get them to make sure that they support all of the local rebates, because there's been a ton of interest. We host an annual film festival here in Klamath every September. And last year we put it online because of COVID and got a ton of response from it as a result from film producers that were interested in coming to Klamath after they saw some of, we did a whole Come Film in Klamath ad campaign with it and whatnot. So now we've got multiple feature films that are looking at coming to Klamath Falls, which is fantastic because we have a very eclectic membership here. Just within this meeting, we've got filmmakers, photographers, musicians, we've got actors down to students who just want to kind of learn the business. So we haven't had a film shot here since 2018, but we're now looking at possibly 2 or 3 this year, as long as finances and COVID protocols would work out. Thankfully, our COVID numbers are pretty low here. So, Max, maybe you could talk a little bit about what people can expect when a film crew comes to a small community. Because I've been getting hit up left and right about people asking, when are there going to be auditions for extras? And, hey, come use my business to film. It's like, well, that's not really my decision.
Yeah. We've looked at Oregon a number of times to shoot movies. I as a very biased alumni to the University of Oregon, have always been dying to shoot a movie in Oregon, mostly because I want to see a lot of my friends in Portland because I never get to see them. The thing that actually has always held us up in Oregon has never been the rebate. The rebate there's always been pretty good. It's that there aren't as many crews in Oregon as there are in Vancouver. For whatever reason, over the years, there's been so many TV shows in Vancouver, and Vancouver's kind of always been the Hollywood of Canada, if you will. So they've just built this really big base of a lot of crews, a lot of people to choose from. And what we had always heard from everyone who shot in Oregon was that just the crews were limited. And I think Oregon's rebates basically could only cover about 6 productions a year. And so we would always apply, and we just never won the lottery to get in those 6 into those 6 productions. And so I hope the state start to invest more, because it's a place that I'd love to shoot. I admittedly, Kurt, haven't really shot in a small community. If I'm now thinking about it, I've shot in Vancouver and Seoul and London and Charleston, South Carolina, and Atlanta, and New Orleans and Los Angeles. All the places I shoot are relatively close to big cities. I'd say that the closest I've been to shooting in a small town would probably be like, in the suburbs of Vancouver, but it's still Vancouver. So I don't know how it would necessarily affect a small town. That being said, I guess what is it you're interested in? How it would necessarily affect the small community? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I know what to expect because obviously I was in LA for years, and some of our members have worked on films as well. We do actually have some decent crew out here, and Ashland has an amazing collection of crew that work on tons of TV and film. But since we've had multiple productions that have kind of come to us in the last couple of months saying they really want to film here because they love the scenery and backdrops, it's garnered a ton of community interest. Everyone wants to be an extra in it, and every time I'm around town, I get questions of, "Hey, when is the film coming here?" I'm like, "It's not my decision. It's up to other people involved for schedules." But everyone's just super excited about the prospect of films being shot here, and not just for the cultural aspect, but for economic benefits too. So I guess maybe you could talk about like what, for the communities that you shoot in, maybe what people can expect as far as like street shutdowns and closures and higher community, stuff like that.
Yeah, it'll really depend on the type of film and the budget of the film. For example, if the incentives got better there, and let's say a horror movie, a Blumhouse movie, decided to shoot in Ashland, they're going to limit their locations to a house and maybe an office space and maybe a high school, right? At most, they're going to use 3 locations. And so you're not going to deal with a lot of closures. In fact, when you shoot at a house, we don't really usually even shut down that street. That street might find some annoyance in the fact that there's a couple of semi trucks there throughout the time they're shooting. But usually there'd be a base camp in an empty parking lot. We'd go find a high school that's not in session, or we'd go find an empty church parking lot and rent that out for a while, which is where base camp would be, where the trailers would be, where the catering would be, where kind of the office space, the temporary office space would be. But usually as far as extras, the same thing kind of applies. If it's a smaller film, extras cost money, and the less extras they can have, the better. If you're dealing with a bigger movie in bigger scope and they need extras at a high school, or they need extras, in a church, then you're gonna have a lot more. But it's just really dependent on the scope of the film. To be honest, on our movie that we just shot in London, we had to shoot a lot of our movie at an airport, and we were both lucky and unlucky that COVID was happening, because the luck in that was that the airports in London were shut down, literally shut down. So we had these entire giant terminals to ourselves. The problem was we had to spend so much money to get the extras to fill it out, to make it look like a working airport, where a lot of other people will kind of section off an area and they'll have a limited number of extras, and they'll let the normal airport keep going as they do in the background. And so it just looks more filled out. So there's pros and cons to that sort of thing. But we had a lot of extras in this last movie, whereas, on the To All the Boys I Loved Before movies, the only time we really used a bunch of extras when we had like our high school scene. Otherwise, it was quite intimate.
Cool. Well, if you do have a script come your way that needs a small town, hit me up, because we do have good crews down here, great incentives. Obviously, no sales tax helps, and really, really nice, diverse backdrops here. What I really was surprised with the Klamath, because obviously, coming from Eugene, like 99% of Oregonians, I'd never gone south of Bend or east of Crater Lake, right? But there's this whole pocket where we have deserts, mountains, thick forest, rivers, lakes, and open ag plains and city center all within 15-minute drive, which that's pretty damn rare if you look across the country to have that diverse of backdrops all within close proximity. So I've been using that as our key selling point to try to bring film productions here. That you have a lot of different gorgeous outdoor scenery within a very close proximity, which is going to save you money on travel time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually one of the things why Vancouver is such a hot spot. Honestly, it's such a quick drive to get to the mountains there. You have there's actually an area in the south of Vancouver that has like a very kind of Cape Cod beach feel. So we just shot a movie that was supposed to take place on Lake Michigan, and we shot it in Vancouver because they had that sort of beach feel. And then they obviously have the suburbs. They have modern city. I mean, when we shot To All the Boys, we went to New York for about 5 days, and we shot New York for New York. But there was a couple scenes where we had to shoot inside of a fancy New York hotel, and we just shot that in Vancouver in a hotel there because it's very easy to double. So yeah, I mean, it just depends on a film's needs, and the bigger budget stuff, they're often looking for bigger cities, which is why and Portland's great for that. One of the things that I have always felt is a lot of films shoot in the same cities constantly, and people are getting used to it, whether it's Atlanta or even Vancouver for that matter. I think being able to go shoot in a city like Portland that hasn't been shot in as much would actually be quite advantageous for a film to give it its own vibe, its own feel.
Yeah, totally. Well, we have a couple of filmmakers who are on the call now that I'm sure are interested. Nick, did you have anything that you want to talk to Max about specifically, or?
Sure. I was just curious. I've directed a film, but maybe you could explain what's the director's relationship with the producer. I feel like it's like a pretty basic question, but I realize that it's also very broad. But I'd love to hear your input. What the relationship is like you with the director.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, I've always been fortunate enough to work in movies under 10 million, and in that sort of space, our relationship with directors is intimate. I mean, the minute that a director is hired, we are talking to our directors every single day until the movie is released, which means we're probably talking to the director every single day for over a year. Maybe bigger Disney and Marvel movies where the director is a big part, but obviously the VFX director is another big part. The producers might not be as close with the directors on a day-to-day basis. They might kind of not see them for a week at times. But for myself, on these type of movies, the minute we hire a director, we're talking to them constantly about scripts. We're talking to them about their vision for the film from a visual perspective, from a cinematic perspective. We're talking to them about talent. Then we get into the prep period, and honestly, the closest that a director and a producer, at least from our perspective, gets is during that prep period. When it comes to especially these YA rom-coms, we have a good understanding of kind of what the secret sauce is, and so we sort of know which kind of I don't know what's the right word, milestones to hit during prep, and so we are constantly talking to our directors every day. Hey, we've got to get this thing done by X date so we're on time, and then once we're shooting, I think a little bit of the pressure's off. We always feel like 90% of the movie's success rides on pre-production. It's all in the prep. If you prepped right, if you know what shots you're doing, if you have everything planned out properly, the actual physical production side should go smoothly. Now, there's obviously the chemistry of the actors on set you'll have to deal with. Certain things go wrong on a certain day, but generally, if you prepped right, your movie should really go, at least according to, the movie should turn out the way that you want it to turn out based on your prep. If you have a bad prep, you're going to have a bad movie. It's really hard to shoot a movie on the fly. There's just too many moving parts. So I would say, we're constantly talking to our directors every day through the end of production. I think we probably talk to our directors maybe every other day once we're in post. We try to give them that space while they're just, in a cave with their editor for months at a time. We're extremely close with our directors because we have to be.
I need to brag about something real quick to you, Max, and let me show you on screen. So what you're seeing there is a marker on the historic Oregon Film Trail, which the Oregon Film Office launched about 3 years ago, recognizing some of the films that are of biggest historic significance shot in the state of Oregon, so like The Goonies and Animal House and The General, stuff like that. And the last film that was shot here in Klamath, we got approved for. Phoenix, Oregon was shot here in 2018, a little independent production. But what was amazing about it was they had no distribution deal when they shot it, so they literally took the film on the road in an RV going around the country to festivals. They ended up releasing it in mid-March of last year. So its release to theaters coincided with the National Theater shutdown. However, they also did an online release. And, I know all of the films that you work on and everyone else's films, they're always doing these simultaneous on-demands or HBO Max or whatever. But a year ago, sorry, there's the jet overhead. A year ago, no one was really doing that, but the Phoenix, Oregon crew did. And so as a result, they ended up with the #1 movie in America by default as the only film that qualified for domestic box office. For the week that every theater was. It's also the lowest grossing #1 in film history. But damn it, we got the #1 shot in Klamath Falls, which we think is pretty darn cool. So last weekend, we put up a historic marker downtown and did a Q&A with the cast and screened the film just technically.
That's great.
So that's the 33rd. That's the 33rd marker that's been put up in the state of Oregon for recognized films, but it's only the 3rd one in Southern Oregon.
Well, you brought up something that everyone in the film industry is dealing with right now, which is distribution. With COVID-19 over the last year and for the foreseeable future, movie theaters are shut down in most parts of the country. And so as films are being made, a lot of the discussion is what is being made specifically to go to the streaming market and what is being made to kind of be held back in the vault to then be released in the future when theaters open. There's obviously a lot of big films we all want to see, from Top Gun to James Bond, that are just being held back until theaters can open wide. But right now, when we're developing our films, we're not even thinking about theatrical for the most part. It just doesn't. It's just such an uncertain future for that business, that specifically in our boat, because we make movies for a younger generation, and that younger generation is typically staying home and watching Netflix anyways. But I think a lot of people are kind of struggling with this. How much time and effort are you going to put into developing big studio finance movies that have a very uncertain distribution future? So.
Yeah. I'm on a lot of conference calls with other film festival coordinators all over the country, and I remember maybe a month or two ago we were talking about the upcoming Academy Awards, obviously end of April instead of February this year. And I brought up the fact, when was the last time you actually saw a movie in the theater? So what qualifies for the awards this year? I honestly can't remember seeing a new film since February or March, when it was Sonic the Hedgehog and a couple of other films that came out pre-COVID. And then of course there was Tenet, and what else is even up for awards this year?
I can't even think. I'm trying to look up right now. I can't remember what the last film I saw in theaters was, other than I can't think about that.
Well, it's interesting because previous to COVID, there was that whole pushback against Spielberg and a few others were saying that a film has to be released in theaters to be eligible for the awards. They were
Of
getting
course,
sick and tired of like these films winning awards, and now there's been so few films released to theaters. How would they even do the awards if they don't accept some of the online films?
Yeah, I'm trying to look. I'm looking up right now. I'm just trying to see what came out. Yeah, I guess Invisible.
In July, there was Bill and Ted 3 and Sonic before the COVID hit, and beyond that, I have a hard time thinking of what even came out in 2020.
I know. Man. Oh, I saw The Gentleman. Love that movie. I think that was probably the last thing I saw in theaters.
So I want to make sure that we open this up to questions for those who haven't had a chance yet. So John or Mary Jane or Heidi or Joyce or Michael, is there anything you'd like to ask Max while we got him on the line here?
Well, I have a question, I guess. It's kind of like permits. As I was just, the logistics of some of the filmmaking. It's like, it's one thing to have an idea, you want to do this, that. It's another thing that, well, how are we going to be able to do it? Who's going to allow us to do it, or what permits do we got to get? So how long does it take to get permits? When do you really, where's that breaking line when you need to get them versus you don't? And how much do they kind of cost? I mean, I'm interested in like performance rights, getting those. I'm just the logistics side of life is a little interesting to me, because there's how it is. You have that idea, you want to do it, and then you realize all this red tape that comes flying at you later on. You're like, oh boy. So some insights.
John, I wish I could give you more. I'm fortunate enough that in my position, I get to throw all that to the line producer and have him just come back to me and tell me it's done. So
no, that's okay. I mean, sometimes I'm just always curious. It's like, whose job is it? We get these long lines of all these different types of people that are involved in the movie. I'm like, what do these different people do?
Yeah. So the line producer is sort of the actual producer of the on-set, details, if you will. And he or she will have a team underneath them that is handling permits. That's handling our, our ability to shoot on a location, our ability to shut down a street, our ability to shoot potentially a local monument that needs permission to shoot. For example, we shot the Empire State Building when we were in New York recently, and we needed to go through a whole negotiation with them over how long we could shoot it, and if we did, what allowances they were allowed to have in putting that on their sort of educational reel. And there's a lot that goes into it. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers for you. If you guys ever get a line producer on here, that's a great question for them. They will be able to give you all those details. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. I'm kind of curious then, just what is the kind of like the nugget handful of people that you really need to do a movie then? I mean, obviously you got like casting, you got your director, the producer. I mean, I don't always know exactly what all these people sometimes do or don't do in their categories, but I'm just kind of curious, what is kind of like the nugget that you need to make sure you have in each category?
It depends on the film, right? There's every job that exists on a film is important, and it's never really a sense of could you lose a certain job on a film. It's, do you need as many people doing that same job on a film? And it really depends on the budget and the scope and how much cast you have, how many locations you have, if there's visual effects or not. Again, if you're looking at a horror movie that's just going to be shooting for the most part in a house like The Conjuring was, you're going to need less crew than you would if you're going to be shooting at multiple locations on site, all that sort of stuff. It depends on the size and the scope of the movie and what the needs are of the movie. But it's cliche, but the truth is a movie really comes together because of the sum of its parts. I can't go back and look at a movie and say that, this was all the director and this was all the producer, this was all the writer, this was all the actors. At the end of the day, they're all able to perform and do their duties because a lot of the below the line people who from your grip to your sound guy to makeup artists to costume designers, all of that stuff is super important. I always genuinely feel like one of the most underappreciated is production designer. We've worked with some amazing production designers, and it's one of these things where, like, when we enjoy the visuals of a film, the sort of cinematic scope of a film, oftentimes we find ourselves giving credit to the cinematographer and the director, and as well we should. But the person who seems to always get sort of left out from the credit that they really deserve, oftentimes in those cases, is the production designer. Amelie is a beautiful film. Jean-Pierre Jeunet is an amazing director. He has an amazing eye for visuals, but that production designer who built those sets and made the vibrancy of the colors in those sets pop, probably didn't get as much credit as they deserved. So I would say that's at least that's one of the below the line jobs that I feel like is underappreciated, and should often be given more credit for.
Thanks for bringing that up, Max. First of all, Jean-Pierre Jeunet is my all-time favorite director. I love all of his films, Micmacs and The Young and Prodigious T.S. Spivet, and all of his films are fantastic. But it is interesting, John, with some of the sets that I've been on, and obviously Max has been on more sets than I have, but and just directors and producers that I've talked to, it's usually either the director or the lead actors that are the ones appearing on all the marquees and on the late night talk shows, and the ones that they're using to try to sell the film. But if you talk to them honestly about who the real superstars are on the set, they'll usually mention the grips or the costume designers or the makeup artists, because they're the ones who are usually the first one there in the morning and the last ones to leave, and nothing happens without their work all day long. They're the ones running the lights and the electrical and doing everything behind the scenes to make sure that each setup can be done. So that the respect for the crews is really, really immense when you have a good quality crew on set.
Yeah, and it depends on the movie too. When we first made To All the Boys I Loved Before, a lot of the praise we got was about the cinematography and the production design and the costumes. And so, those movies in particular, I mean, our costumes on the first movie, I don't know, I think we had like 60 costumes for our main character. And all of a sudden we were seeing little girls dressing up as our main character, Lara Jean, for Halloween. And it was like one of these things where we were just like, wow, like we were just here to make a movie. We didn't think it was going to stick in the way that, young girls across the country were going to be dressing up like our main character. And then, it's actually interesting, Kurt, that you mentioned how much you like Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Our cinematographer, Michael Fimignari, who we brought on to direct the second and third movies, he's also the cinematographer for everything Mike Flanagan does. So Oculus, Haunting at Hill House. He does a lot of genre movies, but he is also the director of To All the Boys 2 and 3. And he was the cinematographer on the first movie. And he pitched us when he was coming to shoot this film, said, I basically want to make an homage to Jean-Pierre Jeunet in this film. And so you'll find the color palette is similar to Amelie. You'll find a lot of the lenses are similar to Amelie. It was definitely an homage to that film, and obviously a little bit of Wes Anderson sprinkled in. But he and the production designer really nailed the color palette and the tone of the cinematic scope that was created on the film.
Yeah, sorry, we have another jet going off overhead. If anyone isn't familiar with who we're talking about, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, he obviously a French director. Almost all of his films are in French, and what's interesting is that he almost always uses the exact same cast in all of his films. Dominique Pignot has been in every single one of his movies. And Audrey Tautou has been in a bunch of his films. His most famous film here in this country is Amelie, but he's been in a bunch of really great films. I absolutely adore Micmacs. I recommend it to everybody. It's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious. Find it.
If I had to recommend three from him, it would be Amelie, Micmacs, and Delicatessen. Those three in particular, I think, are just literal genius films that I could watch time and time again. So if you're ever needing new content during COVID-19 because there's not enough on the streamers right now, and you want to go watch an old film, go watch some of his films. They're just a delight.
Yep. Well, I want to make sure that some folks who haven't had a chance to talk yet get a chance to ask. So Joyce or Michael or Mary Jane, Tom or Heidi, if you have a question for Max, feel free to speak up.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to say thank you to Max. It's been so informative and very, very interesting hearing things about the film industry I wasn't aware of. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here.
Your third time here. Luckily, we got you through this time. I've enjoyed it each time. So,
okay, thank you, Tom.
I will voice and support Joyce's statement that every time you come on, we learn something a little bit new. You broaden our horizons, and we get a sneak peek behind the curtain, so to say, of what's going on.
I enjoyed it as well. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you for shedding some light on how COVID affects the film industry and how it's coping and all. That was my question, and it was covered quite nicely. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. If there's anything else you want to know about how COVID's affecting us, happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. Do you find it challenging to abide by the guidelines, rules, and everything to keep it safe? Or it sounded like it doesn't seem to be a real roadblock, that people are cooperative and respectful and so forth.
Yeah, I think it probably changes production to production. I think we've been fortunate that on the movies we've shot during COVID, we've had great crews that have been really respectful. I think the first movie we shot in COVID up in Vancouver was more of a challenge because we were learning it all for the first time, you know. But since then, we feel like we've kind of nailed it down. We understand the protocols. We understand what's worked. We understand what kind of was maybe unnecessary and was overkill that we could kind of scale back on. You know, there's certain things that we just gained a lot of information from the first one. And at this point, it doesn't feel like as much of a roadblock. There are certain things that become a challenge. One of the things that most places in town are dealing with right now that is sort of not out in the public because no one would care, and not because it's a secret, is that most studios have insurance deals that are expiring in the next couple of months, and they have to re-up their insurance deals. These current insurance deals cover COVID because COVID wasn't anything to be put in those deals. But now, COVID will not be covered in these insurance deals unless you want to pay an extra sum of money per film. And that extra sum of money is pretty hefty. And so there's a moment right now where a lot of studios are pushing really, really hard to go and shoot as many movies as possible before that insurance deal runs up, before the costs become too much. So that has been a bit of a challenge for a lot of people. I mean, we ourselves have a movie coming up, and we're trying to get it off the ground, under the wire. And so we have to kind of push extra fast, but we'll make the movie either way. It's just, we'll take a financial hit in the budget if we can't make the deadline, because the reality is we have to have COVID coverage. It'd be too risky to do it without it. So that's one of the ways that's affecting people. But the truth is, after the insurance deals get re-upped with kind of the new language, and that's just going to be the standard, if you will. So it's just going to be something people have to deal with. Obviously, the vaccines will be very helpful to assuaging some of those concerns.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and Max, I appreciate you sticking with us and joining us. It's always great anytime that we can get you here and that we can actually hear you and you can hear us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me back for a second time.
Hey, Max. Yeah. When it comes to the budget, like you say, you got about 10 million budget. Yeah. What are the biggest buckets that eat the bulk of that money? What parts of the film, or is it pretty evenly spread?
Well, no, I'd say there's two areas that are the most significant. Above the line, which if you don't know, above the line is cast, director, writer, producers. Those are all the above the line costs. Those costs come in bigger sums, and so naturally they take up a good chunk of that 10 million. The other area is truly locations. Locations is genuinely the most expensive thing in a movie, and it's not because of the permits of locations, it is because of the moves. It costs a lot of money to pick up your entire production from one location and move it to another location. So the more you can scale back the number of locations in your movie, the easier it is to put more money on screen elsewhere or to limit your budget. You know, I shot a movie. One of the hardest movies I had to shoot recently was Spontaneous, Kurt, because in the initial script, there was a ton of locations. And we also had to explode a bunch of kids in those locations with a lot of blood. And so we'd have these locations, and then we have to clean up these locations after you'd basically have this giant blood explosion in a classroom. So we had a lot of cost in there of cleaning up the places where there was those spontaneous combustion moments, but then also the original script just had too many locations, and we had to kind of figure out how to scale back those locations or treat certain locations as 2 or 3 different places. So that John, honestly, is probably, besides above the line, locations is oftentimes where a significant chunk of your budget comes from.
Yeah, thanks, Max.
Yeah, and so folks know Spontaneous, the movie that Max has recently made. It starred Charlie Plummer, whose first film was Lean on Pete, which was our feature film for the 2018 Klamath Independent Film Festival. That was shot largely in the Burns area, so that's a Southern Oregon film that starred an actor that was doing movies with Max.
That's right.
So
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
In the last couple minutes here, Michael and Heidi haven't been able to ask a question yet. Do either of you want to talk to Max about something?
Yeah, I actually just finally remembered my question. I lost it a good while ago, but I got it back. You mentioned selling the first To All the Boys film to Netflix. How did the sequels work for that kind of distribution? Did you sell them all at once, or did Netflix, I guess, come back and ask for more? And what did the extreme success of those films do to kind of affect that deal?
Yeah, so there's a company called Awesomeness.tv, which is where we had worked when we had made the first To All the Boys. Awesomeness, which at the time was owned by DreamWorks Animation, financed the first film. We ended up selling it to Netflix. And at the time this is the kind of the crazy background of it. The time I believe, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly, at the time that we sold it to Netflix, Comcast had already bought DreamWorks Animation. So we were selling that movie as a Comcast subsidiary. But then by the time the movie came out and became a big hit, and Netflix wanted to make 2 more movies based on the second and third books, Viacom had bought Awesomeness from Comcast. So by that point, Viacom was the rights holders to All the Boys I Loved Before. So if they had wanted to, Viacom could have said, thank you, Netflix, we're going to go make these for Paramount. They didn't. They recognized that a big part of the success of the films was because of the platform, because that's where young people are. And so Netflix had to make a rights deal with Viacom, and then they had to make our producer deals. And then they had to make the actor deals and the author deals and the director deals. And then we ended up making the sequels. So Netflix had initially just licensed the first film, and then they had to relicense the second and third. And yes, the deal process for the sequels to a successful first movie are always going to take longer, and they did. But it was a smooth process. It's just there's more cooks in the kitchen, and negotiations will often run longer when you're dealing with sequels because you had a lot of success in the first, and people are owed more money for the next film.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that kind of licensing changeover was happening. And I think I could be wrong about this, but didn't like it must have been Viacom owns Nickelodeon, I believe, or something like that. And I think around that time they were doing a partnership with Netflix as well. But now I'm seeing this Paramount Plus thing coming out, so I don't even know what's going on with that anymore.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changeover with a lot of these bigger multimedia companies in the past couple of years. I mean, Paramount and CBS merged, and so CBS All Access is basically becoming Paramount Plus. So if you have CBS All Access right now, you're gonna have Paramount Plus this week. It's just gonna shift over. You already have a subscription. I already have CBS All Access because I watch Champions League soccer on it. And so I just realized today, I was like, oh, I'm going to get all this new content because I guess I already have Paramount Plus. But Paramount Plus is going to be making just television. They're not going to be doing films. But, you know, every multimedia company, from Paramount to Universal, everyone's got their own streaming services now, which is going to make Netflix's job a little bit harder. They have to create original content, because Universal and Disney and Paramount and other places that have their own streaming services, Warner Brothers, which with HBO Max, they're going to stop licensing their big title to Netflix. Netflix's library is going to get consistently smaller from other people's films. And so in these coming years, Netflix's biggest challenge is going to be creating their own franchises. And that it's going to be very interesting in the coming years to see, which of these streaming services sort of float to the top and start to compete with Netflix. And right now, the biggest challenger is Disney Plus, because Disney inherently has a ton of franchises, a ton of content that everyone knows about. Netflix, most of their big IP at this point is in the TV space, and so they're trying to build more franchises out of the film space. We were actually their first franchise with To All the Boys I Loved Before in the feature space. So they need more. We're working on a bunch of stuff with them to help provide more. But yeah, there was a lot of changeover with Viacom and Comcast and all that. And there's always these sort of deals behind the scenes that a lot of people don't sort of just put the pieces together. Like the information's all out there that Viacom bought Awesomeness at the right time, and then Netflix had to, make these deals. But they're just, just typically not interesting to the public, so no one really writes about it.
And does Netflix provide any sort of, I guess, not necessarily a performance bonus, but I know some distribution platforms for other media will cut special deals if something sells well. Does Netflix do anything? I know they typically don't broadcast their viewership numbers, but does Netflix offer any sort of viewership incentives for something, especially like with how popular that was? No? Okay.
Not in our experience, and we've got one of the most successful, as far as viewership goes, one of the most successful film franchises they've ever had. No, what they end up doing in all of their deals is they inherently have to pay more upfront to cover the fact that there is no backend at Netflix. So, for example, a director might have a quote at a typical studio like Warner Brothers or Paramount, a theatrical studio, of $1 million. That might be their director quote. But Netflix might have to pay $3 million because there's no potential for that director to have a success in the box office and make a bunch of back end from their contingent compensation of their box office bonuses. So Netflix sort of has to pay that out up front. Now, what that means for the non-A-list of A-list people is that you can go to Netflix and hit a double most of the time. Financially, you can have a win. But the kind of money that you would make, for example, if I'll give a good example. There was a very big blockbuster success 2 years ago. I can't say what it is, but there was a director who basically took the minimum amount of fees up front, but he took a lot more equity in the back end. And the studio at the time didn't fully believe in that movie, and they were happy to do that. They thought that the movie would do fine, but not crush. The movie ended up making, I think, close to $1 billion. And this guy ended up making over $100 million because of his back end. And so ultimately, you can't do that at Netflix. You can take a much nicer upfront fee, but you don't have the ability to have that sort of success. So a lot of directors, depending on where they are in their lives, they might want to take the big swing and bet on themselves and take it to set up for a studio. At the same time, some people just want to take that upfront money. And the reason we like to work with Netflix so often is because we're going to get more eyeballs on our movie on Netflix than any other capacity. Whether it's a theatrical movie or another streamer, no one has more eyeballs than Netflix. And that's what we care about more than anything. We want our movies to be seen by the most amount of people possible. So.
Great, thanks, Max.
I had to laugh a little bit, Max, when you said that you have CBS All Access in order to watch soccer, because it made me think back to about a decade or so ago. Max and I went to a bar in LA to watch the World Cup, and I was telling Max the entire time, like, dude, Americans don't understand soccer. You're wasting your time with this. We showed up at a bar, and within 5 minutes, Max is looking over at me like, oh my God, the people in here are such idiots. They don't understand a thing about soccer. They're like screaming, go forward the entire time. That's I think the last time we gave up basically going to bars to watch soccer games after that game because it was such an embarrassment. So
it's funny you say that, Kurt, because I think 4 years after that, in the 2014 World Cup, my boss, my mentor, Matt, and I, we decided to go watch the U.S. play Belgium in, I think it was the round of 16. And England had just been eliminated. And Matt and I get to this bar, and I think his buddy ran the bar, and so they kind of put us upstairs in the kind of private section. And we get up there, and we knew that you go into this sort of place, you're going to see some people. And so there were a couple of actors from Game of Thrones there, who I won't name. And then when we got up there, we sit down, and I realized two of the starting English soccer players from the team that was just in Brazil were there. And it's because they were on vacation now. They got knocked out of the World Cup, and they decided to go to Los Angeles for vacation, but they wanted to watch the match. And so we're sitting up there, and the English players were just laughing at how dumb the American fans in the bar were the whole time, because it was such a foreign sport to so many of these fans who just wanted to root on the USA. They just wanted to cheer for the USA to beat Belgium. And I just remember these English players sitting up there looking at us the way that I would probably laugh at English people watching American football. And it was like they were speaking another language. It was pretty funny, but it is true. But Kurt, our country has made some significant strides in the last decade with that sport. All right.
I think it was a bar in Pasadena, or maybe it was Glendale that we went to, and within 5 minutes of the game, we're both sitting there just like, oh my God, these people are just idiots.
I think it was Lucky Baldwin's. I think we were at Lucky Baldwin's in Pasadena.
Yeah. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, and I want to thank you so much, Max, for getting some time here. But Heidi, you haven't had a chance to talk yet. Did you have a question, or did you notice the fact that we were mentioning Jean-Pierre Jeunet so much? And Heidi,
and funny story, thanks so much for getting me in trouble with my boss because I showed Tia Spivot in my classroom. So, Judy Davis drops the F-bomb a couple times, she get in trouble.
Yeah, I've inundated Heidi with some of my favorite Jean-Pierre films, and I thought The Young and Prodigious Tia Spivot would be a good one to show her students, forgetting the fact that Judy Davis has a pretty epic rant at the end of the film where she starts screaming a bunch of expletives.
I remember I think one of my friends, his wife is a teacher, and she showed Shape of Water, not having not seen the movie. And there's a couple of some scenes in there that maybe some middle schoolers shouldn't have seen.
Oh, Max. Since you do so many movies, I mean, if any of us ever really came up with a good concept, would you ever be open to that? And if so, how developed of an idea would you need to be presented with?
Yeah, I mean, look, for we would, yes, we are open to anything and everything. We get projects in at a bunch of different phases. We will buy a book and adapt it. We will get a done script based on an original idea. We'll hear pitches. I think for the most part, we typically like to have something fully baked as a script, or at least, someone has already bought a book, has gotten the rights to the book, and they have a pitch on how to adapt it. So at that point, we understand kind of the full scope of the story, and we can see the film. The moments in which we buy pitches at our company, they're a little bit rarer. We typically will kind of dive in to that process with writers that we've worked with before, who we trust will get us to the finish line. I think because we're a production company, most production companies don't spend a ton of money developing scripts in-house. Oftentimes they're looking for a studio to fund that. So for us, even though we do have our own fund, I think we oftentimes will be a lot more cautious in spending our money on fully done scripts we can acquire and then do rewrites on, or acquiring books or other articles, pieces of IP, and then going to writers we've worked with, or writers we've been wanting to work with, who have a little bit of experience, that we know that the investment is sound. I think when we're dealing with younger writers, oftentimes I think we want to see a full script before we dive in.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Olivia, do you have a question? Since we're just wrapping up here, Olivia, is there something that you want to ask Max, or do you want to tell Max what your favorite movie is?
My favorite movie is Hotel Transylvania.
Is what movie?
Hotel Transylvania.
Oh, Hotel Transylvania. It's a good one. Adam Sandler's a funny guy, especially as a vampire.
Well,
Hi, Max. I mean, are you open to 3D animation stuff like that and whatnot?
Oh, no, we don't do animation. Animation is expensive, and it's a long process. It's 4 or 5 year process to get a movie made in animation. We try to turn out 5 movies a year rather than 1 every 5 years. So that's not in our financial model for our company, but there are a number of companies out there that do animation. I love animated movies. I've just never really had the patience to make them.
Well, when it comes to like your visual effects in your movie, I mean, what percentage of it are you willing to go to have in it, where you're like, beyond that, you're like, it's too expensive, can't do it?
Well, when you're making movies under 10, and most of our movies, when I say under 10, most of our movies are somewhere between 5 and 7.5. And at that price, anything animation-wise, anything visual effects-wise, it's limited. And the truth is, the type of movies we're making don't really require it. The kind of visual effects that are in there are they're subtle, right? Like, we just shot a movie that takes place on a plane. We built the entire plane ourselves in London in a soundstage, and it looks as real as it gets because they're from real planes. Like the reason we build a plane rather than shooting inside of a plane, we have the option of shooting inside of a 747, is it's too tight. We want to be able to pull a wall away so we can get the right angle.
Right.
We want to be able to pull a seat out so we can get the right angle. But we use subtle visual effects in that there is green screen behind the windows. And so, we're never going to be focused on the view outside the windows. It's going to be out of focus, but it's going to look like we're flying through the air. That's the kind of subtlety in which we use our visual effects on our typical movies. It's quite rare for us to use anything where it's a significant part of the movie, especially when we're doing horror movies. As I said earlier, what you don't see is scarier than what you do see. And we've found that in working with Blumhouse, the movies that are way more successful are ones that, if there's a creature, you're barely going to see that creature. It's in the shadows, or you're not seeing it all, or you just see a hand. The less you can see, the scarier. So we don't do a lot of visual effects often. It's just not conducive to our budgets.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, it's 8 o'clock, so we should start wrapping things up. Max, thank you for the time. If we have any final questions, or if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to give, because we do have a very eclectic membership from actors and filmmakers down to just students who want to make their Instagram look cooler. So if there's any thoughts or advice that you'd like to give, now would be the time.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It was really great talking to you. And Kurt, happy to come back anytime. Good luck, everyone, with all the film watching, and please stay safe and healthy during these weird times.
Thank you, man.
My living room looks really warm and comfortable right now. I mean, we will be doing these meetings here at the Falls Tap House. Hopefully we won't have gale force tonight. But please do come back next month, first Thursday of every month. We'll be doing these. And I think I want to go home and watch a Jean-Pierre Jeunet film now. So maybe Max or A Very Long Engagement, being in Prodigious T.S. Bivett. There's some great movies there, so go check them out.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Right.